Hello everybody, my name is Cameron Lancaster and welcome to my 2014 Subaru BRZ. I just picked up this vehicle, so it's new to me, not new to anybody else, given that it's already trekked 84,500 miles. It's definitely been worn in over its time on this earth, but it's new to me and I'm enjoying it. I'm making this video kind of for fun for myself, just to see if I'm going to enjoy doing this as kind of a YouTube thing, try to put some stuff out there for the internet to enjoy, and try to add some relevant information for anybody who's looking into one of these cars as something as a new daily driver for them or a new project, kind of depending on what it is that you want to take with the vehicle or what route you want to take with the vehicle. I want to address a couple things kind of just off the start, kind of like why did I choose to purchase a 2014 BRZ or just a BRZ or FRS, GT86 in general. And first off, I really wasn't planning on purchasing this car. I decided that I did need something that was going to be more reliable than my current modes of transportation, which was a 2005 Tahoe that was falling apart, and a 1992 Mazda Miata, which was always in a state of disrepair and repair of my own doing. I still have kept both of those vehicles as my own personal projects, and I did need something that was going to be reliable enough to go an hour away and not be considering, will I be able to find a tow home from wherever I was going. So I will look for something newer, reasonably priced, reasonably efficient as a big thing after daily driving a 2005 Tahoe that leaked gas, oil, and power steering fluid. And so I wanted something that's going to be really good. And I was looking at Fiesta STs. I wasn't looking at one of these because I'd fallen under the pretense they were always underpowered, which they are, and that they kind of were for wannabe drifters, not so much for people who enjoyed driving in the sense of, going out on a back road and kind of the more grip approach to it, rather the slide around drifting style. But ultimately, there were a few things with the Fiestas that I looked at that I wasn't quite fond of, and I didn't want to keep humming and hawing and looking around for a car. So I made the decision to look for something else. It was between this or a 9th generation Honda Civic, the last ones with the K-series motors in them. And ultimately, the guy who had this responded. The guy with the Honda didn't. So here I am. This is my Subaru. Now, there's also the constant question in the back of your mind if you purchase a vehicle that's performance-oriented or enthusiast-minded type of vehicle. And that's what I plan to do with the car. Because this is a great platform if you're looking to modify cars and you want to have something that is your project/daily. For me personally, this is not going to be my project. This is going to be just my daily driver to get me A to B and back in one piece and reasonably cheaply. Now, I have already taken this out to an autocross, so there is more of that in this car's future. It's not just going to be sitting around in the driveway, not getting washed. This thing's probably going to get babied, but it's also going to get driven kind of hard. Now, the thing I'm going to do to actually kind of thread that line or run the line between daily driver and project vehicle, mostly be maintenance / preventative maintenance mods. Things like oil coolers, oil pressure gauges, because this car doesn't have an oil pressure gauge, and just kind of basic things to make it a more pleasant experience to live and drive with, and also one that provides more peace of mind for if it is going to be used for autocrossing and potentially track days. So there's a lot to this car that I'm planning on doing, but things like wide bodies or turbos or superchargers or anything like that, those are really way down the line, if at all, and ultimately would probably just come after get another daily, 4 cars. But I'm gonna go for a drive and kind of talk about some of the things I've learned with owning this car, because I've had this for about a month now, and it's been fun. It's been a learning experience for sure, and I think it can pass on some good information for those looking at picking up one of these cars, and provide some value for fellow car enthusiasts. So I'm gonna get rolling here. looking at purchasing one of these vehicles, there's a few things that I've noticed in my first month, and even honestly on the first test drive I had of this vehicle, that I think people would probably like to be aware of going into their first test drive or going into ownership of this vehicle. The biggest, most obvious thing that I found on the test drive and in my month of ownership since is how very vague and sometimes inconsistent feeling the pedals are. And this is primarily the clutch pedal, 90% of it. And then there's also the gas pedal, which doesn't give you a lot of consistent feedback to driving. The clutch is this really bizarre feel compared to what else I've driven that's a stick shift. And I don't have the most expansive repertoire of stick vehicles. This is only the second one that I've owned. The first one was my Miata that I purchased as a kind of a project and to learn to drive stick on. But the Miata, the bite point is at the very top, very end of the pedal travel, and it's very, very linear coming back from the firewall, basically. So you know exactly where the clutch is at, how much bite you've got, and you can really modulate the throttle and the clutch to get yourself going, whether you're going fast, slow, anything. You know exactly what the car is doing. With this vehicle, there's a few things you can do to help, but stock for stock, this car feels horribly alien in respect to its clutch compared to a lot of other stick shift vehicles, because the bite point is at the very, very start of the pedal travel. So if you're used to pushing the clutch in all the way down to the floor to disengage it, once you go to release it, you're never going to actually start releasing the clutch until like the last 25% of where the clutch is getting released. So you're gonna have to do a lot of work to build up muscle memory to readjust it there. Build up a lot of muscle memory to get used to driving it and not have a constant jarring motion when you're changing gears. And with the completely stock, it's extremely difficult. There's a very common mod amongst the BRZ FRS owners called the clutch spring mod, because there's a literal spring attached to the clutch pedal that gives it a really terrible feeling to drive. When you first press it in as stock, it's reasonably stiff. It feels almost like a regular clutch, and then there's an inflection point where it turns and it becomes extra soft. So you go from having reasonably solid clutch feel to almost nothing, and it's just the back inverse on the way back. As you're letting out of the clutch, you get pretty good feel coming back, but ultimately you're not even engaging or disengaging the clutch yet. And then at that same point, it turns back around and pushes it out. So then you're jarring the car into gear with all the clutch material just slapping against the flywheel or the pressure plate. So it's a really odd sensation to try to drive with. And people must learn to drive it that way, because the guy that I bought it off of, he could drive the car just fine. He had no issues with it. He just gotten used to it. For me, I didn't want to put in that time. He'd owned the car for a while, and I didn't want to try to learn to drive it with that weird thing when I could just pull this little spring out. It takes about 10-15 minutes to do if you are okay with climbing up under the into the driver's footwell and popping the spring out. And it feels 100 times better. You get much more engaged feel between your foot and the clutch. You can feel much more where it's at. Now, it's still a very short, high bite point, but you can actually feel where it's at for the most part. And another thing you can do to help with that is you can also adjust the clutch pedal itself down slightly to mimic more of having a lower bite point with the clutch. I've done it. I'm happy with doing it, but ultimately I'm still not super satisfied with the way the clutch feels. But there's only so much you can do, and if I find something else to help out, I'll probably do it, just because it'll make it feel more like a normal clutch and it'll be a more enjoyable experience. Now, the other side is the gas pedal, which isn't a big issue. There's a bit of rev hang with it. Really, it's mostly down at lower RPMs when you're just getting going from a stop, where it really doesn't feel consistent. You can push it, you can put the pedal in, you may get some throttle, you may get none, and I can't explain how it makes a determination of whether it needs a lot of throttle off the line or if it needs almost nothing, and you keep kind of fighting to find a balance point of where it's enough throttle to get you going, but not so little that it's, you know, gonna stall you out. Road here, try to keep you guys in focus for the most part, or in view. And part of that is due to it being a throttle by wire, not a throttle cable. So it's a computer taking your input and applying that to the throttle. And from what I've seen, apparently the engineers who designed the system, what they do is they basically limit the actual amount of the throttle body opening to the amount that it actually can even use. So if you're at 2,000 RPMs, wide open throttle is not going to get you any more than Okay. There we go. Back in focus. At least pointed in the right direction. Adjust you a little bit more, get you a little tighter on there maybe. See if that does any better. Probably a good opportunity to say the car's bouncy. Not terribly. It's not that it, like the suspension's worn out or anything, but it's not soft. If little bumps in the road kind of shaking you around a little bit as you're going bother you, you might not want to look at one of these vehicles, simply because it's kind of stiffly sprung. There's a good bit of damping to it, so it's gonna kind of shake and bounce a little bit, but it comes back to level quite quickly. It doesn't just, keep bouncing around. It's a little bit tough getting into first. I don't know if that's just from the last person to the clutch or if that's on all of these things. A lot of people have said, though, whenever the transmissions are cold, they don't really like to go into gear, which is true. I found that on mine, and seems to be a pretty common theme across it. But you give it like 2 or 3 minutes to warm up, it's fine. It comes back around and easy to get it into gears, or into all the gears. Now, another thing I can't showcase for you right now, but that I've very quickly noticed with this car, that would kind of does bother me and probably bother a lot of you guys, depending on your intent for the car, is the stereo system. Now, this car obviously is 2014. It's not the latest and greatest stereo system, nav system on the market or available even in this car. You can get a much nicer system out of the newer Subarus, or Toyota 86 is no longer the Scion FRS. But the head unit in the 2014, I believe this is for the 13s, 14s, 15s, and I believe 16s. This is the premium system. It's got navigation in it, touchscreen, CD player, Bluetooth, aux input. It's got all that stuff. It sucks. It's not a very intuitive system. The screen isn't the most reactive to your inputs. And it doesn't really integrate well with I'm guessing just newer technology. I can still connect my Bluetooth just fine. However, using the Bluetooth, the audio is very quiet. I can't figure out why, but if I go from Bluetooth audio, max the volume out, it's maybe at the equivalent of like a third volume if I went to the radio and maxed out the volume. So it's not great there. I can plug in with my phone. I've got an iPhone 8, so not even the newest of the iPhones, but it only recognizes iPods according to the screen. And there's sometimes it'll plug in just fine. It'll pull up my podcasts, music, no ifs, ands, or buts. Other times it just refuses to acknowledge it, and then it grays out that little icon, so I can't even access it and try to plug in my phone and listen to music or whatever. So it's annoying. And then from there, you try to turn the music up once you finally got it going, and the audio quality is not phenomenal. It rattles. Ooh, mailman. it rattles a bit, to say the least. But it's only, and a bunny, mailmans and bunnies. It rattles a good bit, and that's pretty well over half volume, mostly where the bass comes in. Not so much on like the highs and the mids, but in the bass it really kind of falls on its face when you're listening to anything. So it's not super great. I've considered upgrading the audio in this car, but it looks like it's going to be somewhere to the tune of about $1,000 to $1,500 to get with all new stuff. To get something like CarPlay that will just connect my phone every single time I ask it to. And then also to upgrade the speakers to something that's going to hold up to, you know, louder volumes and just give you a little better quality noise. I'm not somebody who likes to blare the music all over the place, but I do like to hear what I'm listening to, and I want it to sound good. And coming out of my Tahoe, you know, for all its faults and shaking itself to pieces over the last 150,000 miles, the audio system was still pretty good in that car, and still is. It holds up, you know, to near max volume. It'll sound all right. And it's just a little bit nicer place to be if I'm listening to music than the Subaru is. That can probably be fixed, but it's to be seen. Not crazy fast. You're not going to win any drag races in this car, and you're going to lose to Camrys. But if you can get past that, you're really going to enjoy the way that it drives. Yes, it's only got 200 horsepower crank, so you might be looking at about 170 horsepower to the wheels. This thing is not the slowest car I've owned, thankfully, but it's also about equivalent to the 2,000 pound or 2-ton Lincoln that I was driving a couple years ago, and that was not fast either. Sounded better, had a Cobra V8 in it, but the way the car handles is just miles and miles beyond anything I've driven. Is the best handling thing I've owned is the Miata. However, it's 30 years old and needs a full restoration, modification, however you want to look at it, and it's still not quite there yet. Whereas this car is only 6 years old, everything's still bolted up together properly. It handles like a dream. It's very nimble. You know, you can put it where you want to put it. You can get it to slide out if you want to, and you can control it pretty easily. One of the things I've done with this car in the first month that I've owned it was taking it to an autocross. Partially because the Miata wasn't ready for it, and also because I want to get a feel for the new car, kind of get an idea for how it feels at higher speed, really more aggressive driving. And, you know, in the event I have to make any emergency maneuvers or anything like that, I'm a little bit better prepared than I was beforehand. And the car did pretty well at Autocross, you know. Having not known the car for all that long, you know, it can be a little bit daunting trying to put some power through it and trying to drive it a little kind of aggressively. But it took it in stride, honestly. It really kind of let you push it around a bit. It didn't bite me whenever I kind of screwed up a little bit in it. And it gave you, it inspires confidence. That's the best way to put it. Now, there's obviously more I can pull out of it. I didn't have the greatest time in the world out there. This car, for anybody who's interested in taking it to autocrosses in stock form, would qualify for D Street in the SCCA regulations, which is an interesting, the way the SCCA does their stuff is kind of interesting. I was classed in with Civic Type R's, but a NC Miata was class above us. I don't know. Kind of strange. I was about as quick as the Miata, nowhere close to the Honda. So, the handling of this car is really what you're paying for here, ultimately. It's very direct, very tight feeling. You know, it is electronic power steering, but ultimately it doesn't feel numb. I can feel where the tires are at, and it translates a lot of the road back in through the steering wheel. So if that's something that you like, you're gonna appreciate that. Such as the Fiesta, some cars that I've driven while looking for a new daily driver, the Fiesta handled phenomenally, but the steering did not feel as impressive as this did. The steering felt kind of numb. It was very direct, very tight, but it just didn't really translate to the road. It's something that I think it kind of adds to the experience of driving. If it's gonna be something you take onto, you know, twisty back roads, or it's something you intend to drive, you know, in spirit, it's something that you want to look at and consider. So really, for only being a month in, I don't have a whole lot of big gripes or praises to sing for the car, other than what I've already mentioned. I'm sure as time goes on, I put more miles onto this thing, I'm going to have more complaints. There's little things that you're going to see in just with it being a used car. The faux leather on the steering wheel is starting to peel up in a few spots, and that bothers me. There's a little bit of dog fur that's never come out of this car. I've tried to vacuum it 3 or 4 times, and it's still never come all the way out. And that bugs me. There's rock chips on the front bumper because it came from a saltier area where I think they may have used gravel sometimes to get the roads ready for winter. So, you know, things you're going to have to deal with a pre-owned car. But that's not necessarily specific to this vehicle. So, as more things arise, I'm definitely going to kind of let people know and try to share with the community kind of what to look for and you know, if these are good cars to daily drive. I think I'm going to enjoy this. If not, I'll make it what I want, and I'll find a way to appreciate it. So that's really all that I think I've got for you right now. I hope you've enjoyed. I hope to bring out a little bit more stuff kind of with this car as I do things. I've got a lot of maintenance coming up that I want to do with it. I want to do transmission fluid, diff fluid, just more stuff to get out of the way, peace of mind stuff, as well as kind of pretty it up a little bit. The brake calipers are kind of starting to rust, just because, you know, whatever coating Subaru put on from the factory is starting to come up, and it's starting to kind of show its age. Just clean it up a little bit, make it, you know, a really presentable car, because this is the first thing that I've had personally that's been in good enough condition to warrant keeping it in good condition. So I'm going to do my best to do that. And I'll try to kind of show my process, what I do, and, you know, further the knowledge of the automotive community, because kind of a dwindling community in some places, and I'd like to do my part to help rectify that. So, if you've watched, thank you. If you made it this far, thank you especially. If you want to subscribe, that'd be super awesome. Likes, all that jazz. You've heard on every other channel before, so you know what the deal is with YouTube. I appreciate you being here, and I'm going to try to put out more stuff for you guys. Thank you, and take it easy.